Why has Genene Jones's case garnered so much attention so many decades later?
I trusted you with my daughter, and you would tell me, it's gonna be okay, Rosemary.
You should have to serve 1 year for every year of life you robbed from the babies that you murdered.
I often wonder how a person can sleep at night after taking so many helpless babies' lives.
We all want to know why, and I don't know if we ever will.
Genene Jones, who's known as the killer nurse, pleaded guilty to new murder charges this morning.
Paul Venema, who's been following the Jones case since her initial conviction in 1984, tells us what he's learned about a possible plea deal.
This all brings to a close a tragic saga that began over 3 decades ago. You know, some of this is a challenge to remember, but some of it is like it happened yesterday, simply because of the nature of the case. You know, certainly it was the most disturbing case I'd ever covered. How could you do something like this to an innocent child?
You took God's most precious gift, babies, defenseless, innocent.
It really hits you. It hits you. It could have been my niece. It could have been anyone's child.
To have a nurse who was charged with these crimes is certainly troubling.
Because it's babies. No one expects someone to kill babies. You can't think of anything that's more innocent.
For her to decide on her watch who lived and who died is nothing short of evil.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of KSAT News at 9. Tonight we are telling the story of Genene Jones, a woman for many synonymous with evil, a woman known as the killer nurse, and a woman now serving a life sentence in prison. Jones has been convicted of killing 2 infants by injecting them with powerful drugs while they were in her care in Kerrville and in San Antonio. She's suspected of killing dozens more babies, but it's highly unlikely she will ever be tried in all of the cases in which she's accused. That's because Jones is now serving a life sentence after she was convicted in a Bexar County courtroom in January. She will not be eligible for parole until she is in her late 80s. This case has gripped and perplexed so many not only here in South Texas, but all across the country. How could one nurse allegedly kill infant after infant, and why? In an effort to fully tell this story, we've relied on not only our own past reporting, but the reporting and memories of others connected to these cases. That list includes prosecutors, legal and medical experts, our own Paul Venema, San Antonio Express News courthouse reporter Elizabeth Zavala, and journalist Peter Elkind. Throughout this show, you'll see passages taken from Elkind's 1989 book about Genene Jones, The Death Shift. Tonight, we're starting from the beginning, Jones's beginning, as a nurse who was hired to help.
She was a very polarizing figure, a very divisive figure. There were some nurses, quite a number of nurses, who were first very impressed with her technical skill.
Well, they said and this was a quote, she said, she could establish an IV in a fly. I mean, she was just really, really good.
She protested mightily that she was always on the side of the parents and the kids, and how she was fighting the doctors, to do the right thing for the kids. There were grounds to have fired her totally aside from her harming kids. She came in one day drunk and started messing with patients' medical equipment. She was insubordinate. She grabbed a dead child's body away from the parents and ran down the hallway. There was just an array, a litany of horrible behavior. The kids who were being treated at Bexar County Hospital were in an ICU, and they were already very, very sick. And so it was harder to isolate that something terrible was being done to them. These were not privileged kids and privileged families who had an option to be treated anywhere they wanted. Their kids were in terrible shape. They were desperately poor. They faced all the greatest burdens that impoverished folks in our society do. She was so effusive in her efforts to ingratiate herself with the parents and develop relationships with them and appear to be more caring than any other nurse, that a lot of them found her very charming and grateful for the attention that she was lavishing upon them.
She came under suspicion because she happened to be the nurse who was on duty at the time that children were dying.
And there are some people that remained in her camp, but the larger number of nurses and doctors began to suspect her.
There was a strong correlation between her shifts and the deaths that occurred.
Because this pattern was so dramatic of kids who had done well under other nurses, done well into other shifts, having emergencies when Genene was on duty and caring for these kids. I mean, to the extent that they literally called the shift she worked, the 3 to 11 shift, they began calling it the death shift, which is as chilling as it gets.
In Rolando Santos's case, heparin was the drug that was used.
Heparin is a drug that interferes with blood clotting. It's a blood thinner, and it's usually used in people that have some type of clotting disorder.
The problem with any of these drugs is that they're therapeutic in the correct levels, but when a nurse, such as Genene Jones, is in the position to use these drugs and she can take the drugs and she can inject these babies with a large amount of those drugs. The babies with the way that their infant bodies reacted to it would cause these problems that you would see.
If you were to inject heparin into someone who didn't have a clot, it's just going to cause massive internal bleeding.
You will see things like bleeding out of places they shouldn't bleed from, their eyes, their ears, their nose.
Normally, if you have any kind of just minor injury, your blood just clots and fixes it. But if you're on a blood thinner, then it can't do that, and so even just a tiny nick or cut, it can be a huge emergency.
If there was an old IV line that was run through, or they have old needle marks that had healed, will open up and blood will come through those. In Rolando's case, it was extremely horrifying. That was one of the reasons that Dr. Copeland, who was a young medical resident who had just kind of finished his education and was just starting to be a doctor, out of everybody there, he realized pretty quick that it wasn't something that was naturally happening, it was something that somebody was doing. This was Rolando Santos who was being attacked. The doctor could see from the symptoms that somebody was intentionally poisoning him with heparin. And based upon that, Dr. Copeland in the Rolando Santos case was able to give Rolando a cure called protamine. And protamine just does the reverse of what heparin does. The issue with that is that protamine could have hurt the baby very badly if heparin wasn't the problem. And so Dr. Copeland had to take a big risk, and it turned out that it worked out exactly as he thought, and he was able to save Rolando's life.